Spent $32,000 on my wedding trip. Parents hijacked it for sister's Europe vacation. I shelled out $32,000 to fly my whole family out for my wedding, but my parents turned it into a European vacation with my sister's family instead. And then, they hit me with a text that said, "You're not worth seeing in a wedding dress." I ended up posting pictures on Facebook with the guests who actually showed up, and within an hour, my parents blew up. But before I dive into all that, let me say this, I've noticed the channel's been slowing down a bit lately. If you're here and you like these stories, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to show support. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps keep this community growing strong. Hey Reddit, I'm 30 years old, and just 3 weeks ago, I got married in Maui. My husband now, Ethan, and I spent over a year planning that wedding. We wanted it small, just close family and our dearest friends. For once in my life, I was finally going to celebrate something that was just for me, not for anyone else. Growing up, our family world pretty much spun around my little sister, Zoe. She was always the center of attention, the golden child, the main character in every family memory. Me? I was more like a supporting role, always in the background. Whether it was birthdays, holidays, or even big milestones like graduations, my parents always leaned toward Zoe. I'll never forget the year I graduated college, and they skipped the ceremony just so they could be at Zoe's cheer competition out of state. I kept thinking things would get better as we got older. That maybe, eventually, I'd get the same kind of love. I told myself they loved us both, just in different ways. But that illusion fell apart completely once the wedding came around. Ethan and I live in California, but we picked Maui for the ceremony because Hawaii holds a special place in our hearts. I spent over 2 years saving every penny I could, and Ethan matched me dollar for dollar. Together, we covered just about everything: venue, catering, hotel rooms, travel arrangements. I even paid for my parents, Zoe, her husband Mason, and their 2 kids to fly out and stay in comfort. The total came out to more than $32,000 of my own hard-earned money. I booked them ocean view rooms, private airport shuttles, and I even put together welcome baskets with handwritten notes and personalized gifts. I wanted them to feel loved and appreciated. I really thought this time I might actually get to be the one in the spotlight. But about 3 weeks before the wedding, I got this strange text from my mom. It was vague, something like, "We might need to talk about the trip. Something's come up." I called her right away, but she didn't answer. When she finally got back to me, she dropped the bomb. Zoe and Mason had this last-minute chance to go to Europe for the summer, and my parents had decided to go with them instead. At first, I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. I asked her point blank, "What about the wedding? What about all the money I spent?" She just told me they'd already switched their tickets to Europe. No offer to reimburse me. No apology. Just a cold statement that they thought it would be a better use of their time and memories to travel with Zoe's family. Then came the text that broke me. "You're not worth seeing in a wedding dress." I just froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my phone. I kept reading that text over and over, praying I'd misunderstood something. But no, there it was, plain as day. That was exactly what they meant. Ethan tried to hold me, to comfort me, but I felt completely numb. I had done everything for them, bent over backwards for years, hoping one day they'd see me the same way they saw Zoe. And in the end, I got tossed aside like I didn't matter at all. There was no phone call. Zoe didn't even text. Total silence. I felt crushed, embarrassed, humiliated, and heartbroken. But I wasn't going to let it ruin everything. I called up my best friend, Lila, who, honestly, has always felt more like a real sister to me than Zoe ever did. She told me to keep my chin up and make the wedding beautiful anyway. She even offered to fly out early and help get things organized. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't cancel a single thing. In fact, I went the other direction. I leaned in. I filled those empty rooms with people who had stood by me without question. Ethan's cousins, my old college roommates, my former mentor from work, even a few sweet elderly neighbors who had never been to Hawaii in their lives. And I told every single one of them the truth. I wasn't looking for pity, I just wanted honesty and real love. And I finally got that from the people who truly cared. Our wedding day was everything I hoped it would be. We had the ceremony on a cliff at sunset, with the ocean stretching out behind us. Ethan teared up when he saw me walking down the aisle. Lila gave a heartfelt, emotional speech that reminded everyone that family doesn't always mean blood. After our first dance, I stepped away for a quiet moment. I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and posted a single photo to Facebook. It was me in my wedding dress, standing next to Ethan, surrounded by the people who actually showed up, those who had chosen to be there for me. I added a caption that said something like, "Grateful for the real VIPs who stood by us. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty." And within the hour, that post blew up. Not long after, my mom texted me. She was upset, saying I was trying to shame them publicly. She called the post hurtful and petty, accusing me of painting them as people who had abandoned me. I didn't bother replying. I didn't have to. Her actions had already told the story loud and clear. I just let her words speak for themselves. Then Zoe jumped in with a comment, something snide along the lines of, "Maybe if you weren't always so dramatic, people would actually want to celebrate you." Lila didn't waste a second. She clapped back right underneath it. "Maybe if you weren't so selfish, your sister wouldn't have had to rebuild her wedding guest list from scratch after you all chose a vacation over her wedding day." I left every comment up. I didn't delete a thing. And over the next couple of days, messages started rolling in from extended family I hadn't heard from in ages. My dad's brother called me from Seattle to apologize, saying he had no idea what I'd been dealing with all these years. My aunt from New Jersey left a public comment saying she was embarrassed by my parents' behavior and that I deserved far better than what I'd been given. For once, the truth was finally out in the open. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't covering for anyone, and it felt like I could finally breathe. But the message that caught me completely off guard came from my grandmother, my mom's mom. She had never really been warm toward me growing up. She was always polite, but distant. Cold, even. This time, though, her message broke that old pattern. She wrote, "I didn't raise your mother to treat her children this way. I'm sorry I never spoke up. You looked beautiful. I wish I'd been there." I read that and just broke down. Not because it suddenly made everything okay, but because, for the first time, someone from that side of the family actually acknowledged the truth. Ethan and I spent the rest of our honeymoon in peace. Real peace. I let go of the anger, the hurt, and all those years of chasing approval that was never going to come. I had grieved that imaginary version of my family long enough. Then, as we were boarding the plane home, my phone rang. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to it twice. His voice was stiff, like he was trying to hold something back. He said, "We need to talk. You've made this into a bigger mess than it had to be. Call us when you've calmed down." I handed the phone to Ethan and laughed. Not a single apology. Not even a fake one. It wasn't about what they did to me, it was about how I reacted. How dare I shine a light on their behavior? That was the real issue for them. But I didn't back down. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. When we got back home to California, Ethan and I opened up our wedding album. Right on the cover, we'd written in gold ink, "Chosen family forever." And on the first page, I placed that Facebook photo, the one where I finally stopped trying to squeeze into a role in someone else's story and started writing my own. We settled into newlywed life, but the ripples from that post were still spreading. More and more distant relatives were reaching out, some with kind words, some trying to play peacemaker. But my parents? They just dug in deeper. 3 days after we landed, I got an email from my mom. The subject line read, "We deserve an apology, too." I nearly skipped it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were 4 paragraphs trying to justify everything. She said Zoe's Europe trip had been a rare family bonding opportunity that I should have been understanding about. She claimed I had humiliated them by making private matters public. But the line that really hit me in the chest came at the very end. "You've always been too sensitive. This whole situation proves it." And that's when it finally clicked for me. There was never going to be an apology. Not a real one. No moment of reflection, no owning up to anything. They weren't capable of it. And I wasn't going to find closure through them. So I sat down and wrote a letter. Not for them, for me. I read it out loud to myself. It was a goodbye letter to the version of my parents I had always dreamed of having. I cried through the whole thing. But when I finished, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I felt lighter. Ethan was the one who encouraged me to just block them all, and for once, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about it. So, I blocked my mom, my dad, Zoe, and Mason. I realized I didn't need to keep arguing or begging for them to understand why I was hurt. If they hadn't gotten it by now, they never would. That chapter was over for me. But that wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks later, I got this big envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a thick stack of papers, legal documents. My parents were threatening to sue me for defamation. Yeah, you read that right. Apparently, Mason, Zoe's husband, had been trying to launch a new business, and some potential investors had backed out after seeing my Facebook post and all the comments that followed. My family claimed that my post had damaged their reputation and directly interfered with Mason's professional opportunities. It sounded ridiculous, but honestly, it was scary too. I immediately reached out to a lawyer. Thankfully, Ethan's cousin is a corporate attorney, and he helped us find someone who specializes in personal disputes and social media law. After a quick consultation, our lawyer assured us we had nothing to worry about. My post was truthful, not defamatory, and fully protected under the Constitution. They had no case. Still, just the fact they were willing to take me to court showed how far they'd go to try and punish me for speaking out. Tessa, my ride or die, dropped a comment under the wedding photo that went viral again. She said, "When your enemies try to silence your truth, the best thing to do is stay loud, sis." After that, messages started pouring in from all over. Some came from strangers who had seen my story shared on wedding blogs and TikTok. Turns out, a lot of people connect with the experience of being overlooked, forgotten, or told their happiness doesn't matter. I was flooded with love and support. A few even sent me their own stories about toxic family struggles, thanking me for showing it's okay to walk away from that kind of pain. One message stood out most of all. It was from my cousin Riley, my dad's niece. We hadn't talked in almost 10 years. She wrote me a long, emotional message explaining that she'd gone no contact with my parents years ago after they shamed her for coming out. She said my post gave her the courage to finally speak out publicly. She spent years believing she was the problem, too sensitive, too difficult, too much to handle. I cried reading her message, not because of sadness, but because it finally gave me the validation I'd been craving for years. Validation I never got from the people who were supposed to love me first. Meanwhile, Ethan and I were making plans for a small post-wedding dinner with our chosen family, the people who really showed up for us. We called it our VIP reunion. Everyone who had been at the wedding was invited. No fancy dresses, no pressure, just genuine love and good company. That night, Karina gave me a little gift box. Inside was a gold pendant engraved with 2 simple words, worth it. I hugged her so hard, I nearly knocked over the wine glass. Later that evening, I stood up to thank everyone. I shared something I hadn't said out loud before, that I had finally let go of hoping my parents would ever truly see me. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop shrinking for their approval. That moment, that dinner with my chosen family, felt like the real wedding. Not the ceremony or the dress, but that night surrounded by people who truly cared, was when I felt whole. That table, full of real, messy, imperfect people who chose to be there for me, that was my version of happily ever after. I never reached out to my parents again. Eventually, they dropped the legal threat, probably realizing just how ridiculous the whole thing was. I heard from a distant cousin that Zoe was furious, that I hadn't come crawling back, and that I'd somehow twisted the story to paint myself as the victim. But I wasn't playing the victim. I was simply done pretending. Just last week, I finally printed out that wedding photo, the one I shared on Facebook. I put it in a frame and hung it right above the mantel in our living room. It serves as a daily reminder that even when your own family turns their backs on you, you can still create something beautiful. This morning, Ethan walked past the photo and smiled. He said, "That's the picture of the day you finally became the bride and the main character." And for the first time ever, I believed him.